Hey guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, The Bright Side Girl, and today we're going to be doing my 2020 reading stats video. So this video is going to be exactly how it sounds. It's going to be a super nerdy, detailed look into my reading year for 2022. I will be looking at the My Year in Reading on Goodreads. I usually do an end of the year reading survey, but I'm doing something a little bit differently that you will see tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. So this video is going to be purely statistical things that have happened throughout my reading year. So if that sounds fun to you, then just keep watching. All right, first up, I read 200 books in 2022. I cannot believe it. The most I have ever read was 165, and that was the year I discovered audiobooks and was still physically reading a ton. This year, before you freak out too much, I did a lot of short books, a lot of short novellas, a lot of graphic novels, a lot of short audiobooks, some on purpose, some not. I like using them a lot for readathons. I like little short stories and novellas. I like getting that kind of thing in. So I had no intention of this being such an extremely large reading year, but about the middle of the year, things just really started to take off and I just kind of hit my stride. Audiobooks in particular, short books, graphic novels, all kinds of things, and it just kind of wound up being that way. So I did get some large books in as well, some of the largest books I've read in a really long time, so we'll talk about that in a second. But just kind of keep in mind that most of these are audiobooks, a lot of them were shorter, so the number's kind of all relative. I do have a slight conundrum though, because I normally set my Goodreads goal around 100 every year, and this year I don't know what to set it at because I feel like I'm going to continue to do this kind of a thing next year. I don't know that I'm going to be able to reach 200 books again. I got to about 180 books pretty easily without pushing it, but I did read a little bit more short novellas and pushed it a little bit more towards the end of the year to hit this 200 mark. I don't think I'm doing this next year, but setting my goal at 100 seems kind of silly. So let me know what you guys think I should set my reading goal at for next year. I can't get to any of my books right now because they're still backwards, so I'm just going to be posting pictures for everything I'm talking about, and that'll make it a little bit easier for me. I do own a lot of these though, just FYI. Okay, of those 200 books, 140 were audiobooks and 60 of them were physical books. Now, I think I only read like 12 physical books last year, so even though a lot of these are graphic novels and things, this was a huge jump for me from last year. I really wanted to try to have a really good reading year this year because last year I had my lowest number of reading books that I'd had since I started like BookTube and Bookstagram and all that stuff, and I didn't really love a lot of the books I had read, so I was really proud that I was able to kind of make this year like extra awesome. According to Goodreads, I read 64,793 pages. Obviously, I didn't read this many because majority of the books were audiobooks, and I don't have a way of tracking the audiobook time. I would love to know the audiobook time versus the actual pages, but it would take like some meticulous journaling for me to figure that out, so maybe someday, but this is the overall pages if you count everything I read and listened to. The longest book that I physically read was A Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare, coming in at 699 pages. Cassandra always makes this list every year because I squeeze in a couple of her books, and her books are just gigantic. I did really enjoy this one, so that was helpful. The longest book I listened to was Queen of Air and Darkness, which was the next book in the series, at 893 pages, and this audiobook was 30 hours, and I think this might be my longest audiobook ever. So that was exciting because I'm pretty sure that the 5th Harry Potter audiobook was my longest before this, but this one broke the record. So, and it wasn't unbearable to listen to. I do like to listen to things in between when I listen to really long audios like this, and I do listen at a faster speed, so that really helps, but I did really enjoy this one. All right, the shortest book that I read was North Stars, Welcome to Snowville. This was a Christmassy graphic novel that I wanted to try. Definitely geared more towards kids, and it was only 48 pages, but it was festive and fun. And the shortest audiobook I listened to, and the only classic that I read this year, was Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. This was only an hour long audiobook. It's just a short novella that inspires a bunch of other things that we love based on this story. According to Goodreads, my most shelved book was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, meaning that the most people on Goodreads have this on their Goodreads somewhere, whether they want to read it, whether they have read it, and over 2 million people have this shelved currently currently. The least shelved book that I read was The Island of Misfit Toys. Again, another Christmassy graphic novel. This is based off the Rudolph claymation that we all watched when we were kids, and it was just really fun and cute and had all the Misfit toys in it. And I think only 93 people have this shelved. The highest rated book I read according to Goodreads was Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I think it has close to a 4.5 rating. I really enjoyed this one, but it did not make my top 12 of the year, which I feel like is kind of surprising. My average reading length was 323 pages. I feel like this is slightly lower than other years, but not too much lower. I feel like 350 is about my average reading length because that's the average size of a young adult novel, and that's mostly what I read. And then the short ones and the long ones kind of even it back out. So not too bad. My average rating was a 3.6, which I felt like was higher than last year. I feel like I kind of land between 3.3 and 3.5. Pretty easy to please book reader. I feel like most of my books fall in the 3-star category with a few 4 stars and a very few 5 stars. So not too surprised by this. All right, I had one 1-star book. I talk about this every year, but I don't really do 1 star because to me, 1 star is something that I hated for some reason. If I'm hating a book that much, it's just going to be a DNF for me. So I hardly ever get 1 stars unless something crazy happens at the end or whatever reason. I did get one star this year because I buddy read it with my friend Bella and we were wanting to finish together and we were kind of having fun being like, this is so terrible, can you believe this is happening? So I think I'll talk about this book in a later video. This is the first time I've had a 1-star rating in a long time. By the way, I think these numbers are slightly off. They don't entirely add up to 200 because I had a couple rereads that I read the same book this year, so it only has 1 rating, if that makes sense. So I had 13 2-star books, the most I've ever had, but I also read 200 books, so my average was much higher. And I had, most of these were more like 2.5 stars. I just didn't like them. I didn't hate them, but didn't really like them. And I feel like I was not harsher this year, but a little bit stricter with my 3-star ratings. So for 3 stars, I had a total of 73 books. And then for 4 stars, I had a total of 83 books, which I might need to go adjust some of these 4 stars. I probably didn't have this many 4-star books, but I really do enjoy reading and I go into books for the enjoyment, not to pick them apart. So I'm not terribly hard to please, but I am stricter with my 5 stars. So I had 26 5-star reads. Yay! So some of these are rereads. I would say maybe around half. So I still didn't have a crazy amount of 5 stars last year. I only had 3 5-star reads that weren't rereads. We are improving. I did have a couple that I feel like are going to be long-term favorites, so that was exciting as well. That was kind of the goal for this year. I read a total of 16 new releases, and a lot of these made my favorites of the year list. So I was really proud of myself for that. I have a whole video talking about all of the new releases I read this year that I will link up in the cards and down below in the description if you want to check it out. My most read author, I'm going to do 2 for this because Stephen McCraney was my most read author, but that's because I binged the entire Space Boy graphic novel series, and because it was a graphic novel, I thought I'd put 1 more in here. So my next most read author was Madeline Rue, who writes House of Furies, Court of Shadows, which I reread this year, and then Book of Living Secrets, and I also read Asylum from her. I read a wide range of authors this year. I didn't have one that I read like a ton of besides the graphic novels. So that's something I kind of want to change for next year. I want to have higher amounts of authors read, if that makes sense. So next I wanted to do my most listened to narrator. I spent over an hour one night around Christmas literally looking up every narrator that went to all 140 audiobooks I read, writing them down and seeing which one I listened to the most, only to find out that the answer is Rebecca Solar, who's my favorite. She's my favorite narrator. Not surprising. However, again, like the author, I did a wide range of narrators this year. I feel like normally I listen to a lot more of the same narrators. Rebecca Solar narrates Marissa Meyer and Stephanie Garber's books, so that's why I got hers in, but I only listened to 4 from her. I feel like I normally have a larger amount than that, so that's something else I want to do next year. I love listening to books based on the narrator rather than the author or the story. It's kind of a fun, wild adventure, because if the narrator's really good, it really helps. All right, so I read 0 nonfiction books, which again is something I want to work on for next year. I used to only read nonfiction books like majority of the time in my late 20s. Got a little bit burnt out on them, and so I kind of switched to reading more fiction after a little bit of a burnout, but I do want to get some in because I just think it's good mentally. Have like a few every year, just gives you like some motivation. Then I read a total of 4.5 new adult books. Some of the other ones I read might have been classified as new adult. I don't pay too much attention to this category. I don't really love new adults usually. I say 4.5 because I DNF'd one. This is not a category that I'm like super interested in because I love young adult books, and if I'm going to read something that has more adult themes, I'd rather just read an adult book. So my personal opinion. I read 18 middle grade books. I feel like this is higher than it felt. I felt like I didn't read very many middle grades this year. I love a good middle grade. They're so much more adventurous and wholesome and cozy. So definitely want to get to some more next year, and I have some good ones on the list. Then I read a total of 25 adult books, which I feel like is high for me, and I liked a lot of them, which was really exciting. I'm not against reading adult books. I just really like a grand adventure. I don't like a lot of like steaminess in my book. I don't really like when they use like excessive cussing and things like that. I feel like that happens more with adult books. I also don't like when there's like cancer, trauma, and things like that, or like when the thrillers get like too gory. So young adult's kind of just more of like a safe realm for my like overall enjoyment. But I did really enjoy a lot of the adult books that I read. And then I read 153 YA books, to no one's surprise. And again, enjoyed a lot of them as well. The oldest book that I read was Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. This one, it was written in 1820. Again, this is more of like a novella, and this was the only classic that I got to, which is kind of sad. So need to work on that for next year. I didn't really love this one, I'll be honest. The newest book I read was Cursed by Marissa Meyer. This came out on November 8th. Again, I did pretty good with new releases, and this was one of my most anticipated. Didn't quite live up to the hype, but I still really loved it, and Marissa is my favorite author. I DNF'd 4 books, which I felt like for reading 200 books, and those are not included in my 200, I feel like that was pretty good. So some of them were Wildfire by Karsten Knight, Kill the Farm Boy, and Kingdom of the Feared, just to name a few. I can't remember what the other one was, but I don't think it was too dramatic. I reread 14 books this year, mostly to finish up series. So I'm still on my unfinished series kick, and I did pretty good. We'll do an update video on that in January, so in a couple days. I reread a lot of the books if it had been like over a year since I had read them to continue on with the series. So that's where most of my rereads came from. I think maybe I read 1 or 2 just for fun, and I usually like to do them via audiobook as well. I finished 4 new to me series this year, so that means that I started them and finished this year. To name a couple would be Gilded by Marissa Meyer, finished this duology. Evermore or Everless by Sarah Holland, I finished this duology, and a couple more in there. And then I completed 24 series that were on my list prior to this year. So anything I had started prior to 2022, I finished 24, which I thought was very, very good. Again, we'll go into more detail in this in a video in January, but I was really proud of myself. I stuck to my guns. Some of them were worth it, some of them were not, but I'm really glad to have finished them. I unhauled some of them, I kept some of them were new favorites, so it was definitely worth. And then lastly, my best reading month was March. I read a total of 28 books. 16 were audio and 12 were physical. This is where I started kind of reading these shorter audiobooks because there are a lot of short, spacey novellas. And I did this during Galaxy-a-thon, which is my space-themed readathon that's in March. And then I also did the entire Space Boy graphic novel series. So that's why the physical was so high. And because of that, that made Galaxy-a-thon my best readathon. So for that readathon, I read a total of 20 books. Yay! I was really surprised because I did really, really good with Not So Scary-a-thon, so I thought that might have beat it, but nope. Galaxy-a-thon seems to win every year, and it will be happening again, so stay tuned for a big readathon announcement with all the readathons and all the details coming soon. So that is it. I know this video might be boring to some. I like it. I like doing them. I like seeing all the different stats. I like comparing them throughout the years. One year I will compare through all of the years, all the different stats. That might be kind of fun. So let me know how your reading year went down below in the comments. Stay tuned for a lot more videos to come. I have a lot of things coming out in the beginning of the year. I should have another new video that's kind of a surprise coming out tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of these new videos. Follow me on Instagram at The Bright Side Girl because I have a lot of bookish content on there as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time on The Bright Side.